The stars had always called to Daniel Hayes. Even as a boy growing up in the small town of Cedar Falls, he would lie on his back in the grass and watch the night sky for hours. He dreamed of touching those distant lights, of walking on worlds no human had ever seen. Now, at 34 years old, he stood on the bridge of the starship Horizon's Edge and watched an alien planet spin slowly beneath him. The planet had no name yet. The Coalition had given it a number instead. KX-7. It was the seventh world they had found in this sector of space, and the scanners showed it might support life. Daniel's job was simple. Go down to the surface. Collect samples of soil, water, and anything living. Come back within 3 days. Do not make contact with intelligent species if any existed. Do not bring anything dangerous aboard. Simple orders. Easy to follow. Daniel had done this work 100 times before Captain Lisa Morgan stood beside him, her arms crossed over her chest. She was a hard woman with gray eyes and short black hair. She had served in the fleet for 20 years and had seen things that gave her nightmares. She trusted Daniel because he followed orders and never caused problems. "Lieutenant Commander Hayes," she said, "your shuttle is ready. Remember what we discussed. In and out. No complications." Daniel nodded. "Yes, Captain." 3 days. Samples only. He walked through the narrow corridors of the ship, past crew members who nodded at him or called out greetings. The Horizon's Edge carried 47 people, and Daniel knew every one of them. They were his family now, the only family he had left since his parents died in the food riots. Back on Earth, the shuttle bay was cold and smelled of metal and fuel. Daniel climbed into the small craft and ran through his checks. Everything was green. Everything was ready. He pressed the launch button and felt the shuttle drop away from the main ship. Falling toward the planet below. KX-7 was beautiful from above. It had blue oceans and green continents, just like Earth. White clouds swirled across its surface in patterns that looked almost artistic. Daniel felt the old excitement rise in his chest. This was why he had joined the fleet. This moment of discovery, of being the first human to touch a new world. He brought the shuttle down in a valley surrounded by mountains. The rock formations here were strange. They looked like crystals, purple and blue and silver, growing out of the ground in twisted shapes. Daniel stepped out of the shuttle and felt the alien air fill his lungs. It was thin but breathable. The gravity was a little lighter than Earth, making him feel like he could jump twice as high. For 2 days, Daniel explored the valley. He collected samples of soil and water. He found plants that looked like ferns but glowed faintly in the darkness. He found insects with too many legs and shells that sparkled like diamonds. Everything went into sealed containers for the scientists back on the ship to study. On the 3rd day, Daniel found the ruins. They were hidden behind a wall of crystal formations. Easy to miss if you were not looking carefully. But Daniel had good eyes, and he noticed the straight lines that nature never makes. He pushed through a gap in the crystals and found himself standing before a structure of black stone, half buried in dirt and debris. His heart beat faster. This was not supposed to happen. He should call the captain. He should report what he had found and wait for orders. That was protocol. That was what a good soldier did. But Daniel was not just a soldier. He was also a curious man who had dreamed of the stars his whole life. He had to know what was inside. The entrance was a dark hole in the stone wall. Daniel turned on his flashlight and stepped through. The air inside was stale and old. Dust covered everything in a thick gray blanket. He walked through corridors that twisted and turned, going deeper into the structure. He found rooms filled with machines he did not understand, covered in symbols that hurt his eyes when he looked at them too long. Then he found the chamber. It was small, no bigger than his quarters on the ship. In the center stood a pod made of clear material, like glass but stronger. Faint lights blinked on its surface, showing that it still had power after all these years. Daniel walked closer and looked inside. The creature was tiny. It could fit in the palm of his hand with room to spare. It had scales that shifted color as he watched, moving from deep purple to midnight blue to silver. Small wings lay folded against its body, thin as paper and delicate as flower petals. Its tail curled around its legs, and its head rested on its paws like a sleeping cat. Daniel knew what it looked like. He had seen pictures in old books from Earth, heard stories from his grandmother when he was small. It looked like a dragon, a tiny, perfect dragon made of jewels and moonlight. He reached out and touched the pod. The moment his fingers made contact, the lights on the surface changed from blue to green. There was a soft hissing sound as the seal broke. The top of the pod slid open, and the creature inside opened its eyes. They were copper, bright and warm and filled with an intelligence that took Daniel's breath away. The little dragon looked up at him and made a sound. It was like wind chimes mixed with distant thunder, musical and strange and beautiful. Daniel's communicator beeped. Captain Morgan's voice came through, sharp and clear. "Ace, your time is up. Return to the shuttle immediately." He should tell her. He should describe what he had found and ask for instructions. The creature might be dangerous. It might carry diseases that could kill the whole crew. It might be intelligent, which would make everything complicated in ways he could not even imagine. The dragon chirped again. It stretched its wings and tried to stand, but it was weak. So weak. It had been in that pod for a very long time, Daniel realized. Waiting. Alone. He knew what the captain would say. Leave it. Do not touch it. Come back to the ship and let the scientists decide what to do. That was the safe choice. The smart choice. The choice a good soldier would make. Daniel picked up the little dragon. It was warm against his palm, warmer than it should be, like holding a cup of fresh coffee on a cold morning. It looked up at him with those copper eyes and made a sound that might have been gratitude. "I've got you," Daniel whispered. "I've got you now." He walked back to the shuttle with the dragon hidden inside his jacket, pressed against his heart. He did not know why he was doing this. He did not know what would happen next. He only knew that he could not leave this creature behind, alone in the dark, waiting for someone who might never come. Some choices change everything. Daniel did not know it yet, but he had just made one of those choices. The universe would never be the same. Daniel named the dragon Ember. He chose this name because of the warmth she gave off, a gentle heat that reminded him of campfires and home. When she curled up on his chest at night, it felt like someone had placed a hot water bottle over his heart. He did not know if she was truly female, but something about the way she moved and the softness of her chirps made him think of her that way. For 3 days, Daniel kept his secret. He hid Ember in his quarters, tucking her into a drawer lined with soft clothes when he had to leave for duty. He brought her food from the mess hall, small pieces of meat and vegetables that she ate with delicate bites. He brought her water in a cup, and she drank it while watching him with those bright copper eyes. She was smart. Daniel understood this very quickly. When he spoke to her, she tilted her head and listened like she was trying to learn his words. When he moved around the room, her eyes followed him with clear attention. Sometimes she made sounds back at him, those musical chirps and rumbles, and he felt like she was trying to tell him something important. The horizon's edge was traveling back toward Earth. It would take months to make the journey, even at faster than light speeds. Daniel had time to figure out what to do with Ember. He told himself he would find a way to explain things to the captain. He told himself everything would be fine. He was wrong. On the 4th day, Daniel came back to his quarters and found the drawer empty. His heart dropped into his stomach. He searched everywhere, under the bed, behind the storage containers, inside the ventilation shaft. Ember was gone. He found her 2 hours later, wrapped around a power conduit in the engineering section. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb was standing in front of her with his mouth hanging open. 3 other crew members stood behind him, their faces showing a mix of fear and wonder. "Hayes," Marcus said slowly, "what the hell is that thing?" Ember looked at Daniel. She made a happy chirping sound and released the conduit, flying across the room to land on his shoulder. Her scales had changed color again, now glowing with a faint blue light. Daniel realized she had been feeding on the electrical current. That was why she was so much stronger now, so much more alive. "I can explain," Daniel said, even though he knew he could not. The captain called him to her office within the hour. Daniel stood at attention in front of her desk, Ember still wrapped around his shoulders because she refused to let go. Captain Morgan sat in her chair and looked at him with cold gray eyes. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. "Yes, Captain. I don't think you do." She stood up and walked around the desk. "You brought an unknown alien life form onto my ship. You hid it from me for days. You violated at least 12 different regulations, and you put every person on this vessel at risk." Daniel did not argue. Everything she said was true. The creature could be carrying diseases we have never seen. The captain continued. "It could be dangerous. It could be intelligent, which means we may have just committed an act of kidnapping against a sentient species. Do you have any idea what the Coalition will do when they find out?" "I couldn't leave her," Daniel said quietly. She was alone. She was dying. She is not human, Hayes. She is not even from our galaxy, for all we know. Your job was to collect samples and come back. That's all. Simple orders." Ember made a soft sound against Daniel's neck. It sounded sad, like she understood what was happening, even if she did not understand the words. Captain Morgan was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed and sat back down. "I have to report this. You know that. When we reach Earth, there will be a tribunal. They will take the creature for study. They will probably lock you up for years." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "And if I refuse to give her up? Then I put you in emergency cryostasis right now. You sleep until we get back to Earth, and the military can decide what to do with you." The captain's voice softened just a little. "I don't want to do that, Hayes. You're a good officer. But you've left me no choice." Daniel looked down at Ember. She was watching him with those copper eyes, and he saw something in them that might have been understanding. She knew. Somehow she knew what he was being asked to do, that he could give her up. He could hand her over to the scientists and let them study her. Maybe they would be kind. Maybe they would take good care of her. But Daniel remembered the pod where he had found her, alone in the dark for centuries. He remembered the weakness in her body when she first opened her eyes. He could not do that to her again. "Cryostasis," he said. "I choose cryostasis." Captain Morgan nodded slowly. "I thought you would say that." She pressed a button on her desk. "Medical team to the captain's office." They came with a stretcher and a portable cryopod. Daniel lay down on the stretcher without fighting. Ember stayed on his chest, her small body pressed against his heart. The medical officer, a young woman named Grace Kim, looked at her with uncertain eyes. "Sir, we need to remove the creature before we can." "No," Daniel said. "She stays with me." Grace looked at the captain. Captain Morgan hesitated, then nodded. "Let them stay together. If the creature causes any problems with the cryogenic process, we can deal with it then." They carried Daniel to the medical bay. He lay inside the cryopod with Ember curled against his chest, her tail wrapped around his wrist like she was holding his hand. The cold started to seep into his body as the freezing process began. "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered to her. "I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we'll wake up." Ember lifted her head and looked at him. Her copper eyes glowed in the dim light of the pod. She made a sound soft and warm, like a mother singing to her child. Then she pressed her forehead against his chin and closed her eyes. Daniel felt the cold take him. His thoughts slowed down. His vision faded to white, then to nothing. The last thing he felt was Ember's warmth against his heart, steady and strong, keeping a tiny piece of him alive in the endless cold of frozen sleep. He expected to wake up in chains. He expected courts and judges and prison cells. He expected to lose everything he had worked for his whole life. What he did not expect was to never wake up at all. Or rather, to wake up so much later that everything he knew would be gone, turned to dust by the slow grinding of time. But that is what happened. And when Daniel Hayes finally opened his eyes again, the universe had changed in ways he could never have imagined. The light was wrong. That was the first thing Daniel noticed as his mind crawled back from the darkness of frozen sleep. The light coming through his eyelids was warm and golden, like sunshine through honey. It was not the harsh white light of a ship's medical bay. It was not the cold blue glow of a cryopod. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy and strange, like he was wearing a suit made of stone. His fingers twitched. His toes curled. Slowly, piece by piece, he remembered how to use his own limbs. Daniel opened his eyes. He was lying in a bed softer than anything he had ever felt. The sheets were smooth against his skin, cool and light as water. The room around him was large and filled with plants, green leaves, and bright flowers growing from pots and hanging baskets. Tall windows lined one wall, and through them he could see something that made his heart stop. A city. But not like any city he had ever seen. Towers of crystal grew up from the ground, catching the sunlight and breaking it into rainbows. Between them stood buildings of silver metal and white stone, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. Ships drifted through the sky like birds, some as small as cars and others as large as houses. The whole scene looked like something from a dream, beautiful and impossible. "You're awake." Daniel turned his head. A woman sat in a chair beside his bed, watching him with calm, dark eyes. She had black hair with streaks of silver running through it, and her skin was a warm brown color. She wore clothes unlike anything Daniel had seen before, flowing fabric that seemed to change color when she moved. "Who are you?" Daniel's voice came out rough and broken, like he had not used it in years. "My name is Maya Torres." The woman smiled gently. "I'm the one who found you. Found me?" Daniel tried to sit up. His body protested, muscles screaming at him to stop. Maya reached out and pressed a button on the side of his bed. Slowly, the bed raised him to a sitting position. "Your ship was drifting in deep space," Maya said. "The horizon's edge. We found it 3 months ago. Most of the systems were dead. The crew was." She paused, and sadness crossed her face. "I'm sorry. They didn't survive." Daniel felt cold spread through his chest. The captain, Marcus, Grace, all of them, gone. He had known them. He had eaten meals with them and laughed at their jokes and worked beside them for years. "How?" he asked. "What happened?" "We don't know exactly. Something went wrong with the ship's life support, maybe 100 years after you were frozen. A malfunction. An accident. By the time we found the ship, everyone else had been dead for a very long time. 100 years. Daniel shook his head. "That's not possible. I was only supposed to be frozen until we reached Earth. A few months." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm and soft. "Daniel," she said gently, "you've been frozen for a very long time. Not months. Not years." She took a breath. "It is now the year 4847. You have been asleep for almost 3,000 years." The words did not make sense. Daniel heard them, but his mind refused to understand. 3,000 years. That was longer than human civilization had existed when he was born. That was longer than the time between the pyramids of Egypt and the first spaceflight. Everything he knew, everyone he loved, all of it was gone, turned to dust and forgotten by a universe that had moved on without him. "That's impossible," he whispered. "I know it's hard to believe, but it's true." Maya squeezed his hand. "Your cryopod was damaged, but somehow it kept working. The power should have run out centuries ago, but something was keeping it alive. Something was protecting you." Daniel remembered. The warmth against his chest. The copper eyes watching him in the darkness. "Ember," he said. "Where is Ember?" Maya's expression changed. Something flickered in her eyes, something that looked almost like wonder. "The dragon. We found her with you, wrapped around your body. She was still alive, still keeping your pod running with her own energy. She saved you, Daniel. For 3,000 years, she kept you alive." Tears burned in Daniel's eyes. He did not try to stop them. "Where is she now?" "She's being cared for. She was very weak when we found you. She had given almost everything she had to keep you safe." Maya stood up. "Come, I'll take you to her. Can you walk?" Daniel pushed himself off the bed. His legs shook beneath him, but they held. He took one step, then another, leaning on Maya for support. They walked out of the room and into a hallway made of the same white stone as the buildings outside. "This world," Daniel said. "Where are we?" "A planet called New Haven. It was one of the first colonies Earth established thousands of years ago. Now it's the capital of the Human Alliance." Maya guided him around a corner. "Humanity has spread across the galaxy, Daniel. We've met other species, other civilizations. We've fought wars and made peace. We've built things our ancestors never dreamed of. And Earth? Still there. Still beautiful. I visited once when I was young. The oceans are cleaner now than they were in your time. The forests have grown back." They came to a large room filled with soft light. In the center stood a bed of cushions and blankets, and on that bed lay Ember. She was thin. Her scales had lost their shine, and her wings lay flat against her sides like wilted leaves. But when Daniel walked into the room, her eyes opened. Those copper eyes, the same as the day he found her. She lifted her head and made a sound, weak but happy. Daniel fell to his knees beside her. He reached out and stroked her scales, feeling the faint warmth that still lived inside her. "You stupid, beautiful thing," he said, his voice breaking. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to save me." Ember chirped softly. She pressed her head against his palm and closed her eyes. Daniel felt something pass between them, a connection deeper than words. She had chosen him all those years ago. She had decided he was worth protecting, worth keeping alive through the long darkness of time. "She loves you," Maya said quietly. "We don't fully understand how her species works, but we know that much. She bonded with you the moment you picked her up in that ruin. And once one of her kind bonds with someone, they never let go." Daniel stayed beside Ember for a long time. He held her small body in his arms and felt her breathing slow and steady. Outside the windows, the strange city glowed in the afternoon sun. A new world. A new time. Everything he had known was gone, but Ember was still here. And somehow, that was enough to keep him going. Ember grew stronger over the following weeks. Daniel stayed by her side every day, feeding her and talking to her and watching as the light returned to her copper eyes. Maya visited often, bringing food and medicine and news of the world outside. The news was almost too much to believe. "We call her species the kindred," Maya explained one evening as they sat in the garden outside Daniel's room. The sun was setting, painting the crystal towers in shades of orange and pink. "They are one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Older than humans, older than most civilizations we have ever met. Where do they come from? Daniel asked. No one knows for sure. They were already ancient when the first stars were young. They exist as beings of pure energy, living inside physical bodies made of crystal and scale. When one of them bonds with another intelligent creature, they share everything: memories, knowledge, feelings, and when they die, all of that passes on to their children. Daniel looked at Ember, who was sleeping on a cushion beside him. Her scales glowed faintly in the fading light. She remembers things, he said. Sometimes I see it in her eyes. Like she knows things that happened before I found her. She probably does. The kindred remember everything. Every moment of every life their ancestors lived. Maya paused. Daniel, do you understand what you did when you saved her? I saved one small dragon from dying alone in a ruin. No. Maya shook her head. You saved the last of her kind. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. The last? When you found her, the kindred were believed to be extinct. They had vanished from the galaxy 10,000 years before humans left Earth. No one knew where they went or what happened to them. Scientists thought they had died out or moved to another dimension or simply faded away. Maya reached out and gently touched Ember's sleeping form. But Ember survived. Hidden in that pod, waiting for someone to find her. And when you picked her up and carried her out of that ruin, you brought her species back from the dead. Daniel did not know what to say. He thought about that moment, standing in the dusty chamber with the small creature looking up at him. He had not known any of this. He had just seen something alive and alone and helpless, and he could not walk away. After you were frozen, the ship's scientists studied her, Maya continued. They sent reports back to Earth, describing what she was and what she could do. When humanity finally reached out into the galaxy and met other species, those reports became important. The alien civilizations knew about the kindred. They respected them. They feared them, some of them. And here was humanity, carrying the last kindred with them. What happened? It changed everything. Maya smiled. The kindred had been mediators and peacemakers for millions of years. Other species had gone to war over the right to seek their guidance. When they learned that humans had saved the last one, that we had protected her and cared for her, it changed how they saw us. We were no longer just another young species stumbling into the stars. We were the protectors of the kindred. Ember stirred in her sleep. She opened her eyes and looked at Daniel, then crawled into his lap and pressed against his stomach. He felt her warmth spread through him, chasing away the cold fear that had been building in his heart. She had children, Maya said. Hundreds of years after you were frozen, she laid eggs. Scientists thought she would die after that, like some animals on Earth do. But she didn't. She kept living, kept producing offspring, kept spreading her species back across the galaxy. There are more of them now? Thousands. They live on dozens of worlds, bonded with humans and aliens alike. They serve as translators and healers and bridges between species that would otherwise never understand each other. Maya's eyes were bright with emotion. There have been wars, Daniel. Terrible wars that could have destroyed everything. But every time, the kindred helped us find peace. They showed us how to communicate, how to understand, how to see the universe through eyes that were not our own. Daniel stroked Ember's scales. She made a happy rumbling sound in her chest. She did all that? She started it. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued it. And all of them remember you. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button, and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed a statue. A man stood in the center, his face calm and kind. In his arms he held a small dragon, and around them both was a circle of stars. Daniel recognized his own face, carved in stone and preserved forever. This statue stands in the central plaza of New Haven, Maya said. There are copies of it on 100 other worlds. Schools teach children about you. Songs tell your story. You are Daniel Hayes, the keeper of the kindred, the man who saved the future by saving one small life. Daniel stared at the hologram. He did not feel like a hero. He did not feel like someone who deserved statues and songs. He felt like a confused man who had woken up in a world he did not understand, holding on to the only familiar thing he had left. I didn't know, he said quietly. I didn't know any of this would happen. I just couldn't leave her behind. Maya reached out and took his hand. That's exactly why it worked. You didn't save her for glory or reward. You saved her because it was the right thing to do. Because your heart told you that her life mattered, even when your orders said otherwise. She squeezed his fingers gently. That's what makes humans special, Daniel. Not our technology or our weapons. Our ability to care about things that have nothing to do with our own survival. Ember lifted her head and looked at Daniel. In her copper eyes, he saw something ancient and wise, something that understood the universe far better than he ever could. She pressed her forehead against his chin, just like she had done in the cryopod, just like she had done every time she wanted to tell him that he was loved. Daniel held her close and let the tears fall. He cried for his lost friends. He cried for the world he would never see again. He cried for the man he used to be and the man he had become. And through it all, Ember stayed in his arms, warm and steady, a small piece of hope in a galaxy that had changed beyond all recognition. He was not just Daniel Hayes anymore. He was something more, something he never asked to be, but could not escape. He was the beginning of a story that had changed everything. The invitation came on a morning when the sky was painted in shades of purple and gold. Daniel stood on the balcony of his room and watched the sun rise over the crystal towers. It had been 3 months since he woke up, and he still could not believe this world was real. Maya found him there, holding a small tablet in her hands. Her face was serious but excited. The Galactic Council wants to meet you, she said. They're gathering on the station above us. Representatives from every major species in the known universe. They want to honor you, Daniel. Honor me for what? For everything? For saving the kindred. For being the symbol of what humanity can be. She handed him the tablet. They want to give you whatever you want. Land, wealth, power. You could rule a planet if you asked for it. You could sit on the council itself and help make decisions that affect trillions of lives. Daniel looked at the invitation glowing on the screen. He thought about everything he had learned in the past months. The wars that had been avoided because of Ember's children. The alliances that had formed. The species that had learned to trust each other because the kindred showed them how. His one small choice, made in a dusty ruin on a planet with no name, had rippled out across time and space until it touched everything. But Daniel did not want to rule. He did not want wealth or power or fame. He had never wanted those things, even before he was frozen. He had wanted to explore. He had wanted to see what was out there, beyond the edge of the map. I'll go to the meeting, he said. But I already know what I'm going to ask for. The council chamber was enormous. It hung in space above New Haven, a station shaped like a flower with petals of glass and metal. Inside, creatures of every shape and size filled the seats. Daniel saw beings made of light, beings made of stone, beings with wings and tentacles and eyes that covered their entire bodies. They all turned to watch as he walked into the center of the room. Ember rode on his shoulder. She had grown stronger in the past weeks, her scales bright again and her wings strong enough to carry her through the air. She looked around at the assembled species with calm copper eyes, and Daniel felt her pride flowing through their bond. She was showing him off, he realized. Showing the galaxy the human she had chosen. An ancient being rose from the central seat. It had a body like a tree, with bark for skin and leaves for hair. Its voice sounded like wind through branches when it spoke. Daniel Hayes of Earth, you stand before the council as a living legend. Your act of compassion saved the kindred and changed the course of history. We offer you anything within our power to give. Speak your wish, and it shall be granted. Daniel took a deep breath. Every eye in the chamber was on him. He could feel the weight of their expectations, the hope that he would be wise and noble and worthy of all the stories they had told about him. I want a ship, he said. A small one, fast enough to go anywhere. I want the freedom to explore, to see the universe that grew up while I was sleeping. The tree being tilted its head. You do not wish for power? For wealth? For a world of your own? No, I was an explorer before all of this happened. I just want to keep exploring. Daniel smiled. I also want Maya Torres to come with me, if she's willing. She's been my guide in this new world. I'd like her to keep being my guide out there. Maya made a surprised sound behind him. Daniel turned and saw her standing near the entrance, her eyes wide. Then she smiled, and he knew her answer before she spoke. I was hoping you'd ask, she said. The council murmured among themselves. The tree being nodded slowly. Your wish is humble and pure. It shall be granted. Is there anything else? Daniel looked at Ember. She chirped at him and rubbed her head against his cheek. One more thing. I'd like one of Ember's descendants to bond with me, to be my companion on this journey. Ember's eyes glowed brighter. She lifted her head and sang, a sound like crystal bells ringing in harmony. From somewhere in the crowd, an answer came. A young kindred flew down from the upper seats, smaller than Ember, but just as beautiful. Her scales were silver and blue, like starlight on water. She landed on Daniel's other shoulder and pressed her forehead against his temple. Her name is Soul, Ember's voice said in Daniel's mind. It was the first time she had ever spoken to him directly, and he nearly fell over from shock. She is my granddaughter. She has been waiting her whole life to meet you. Take care of her. I will, Daniel promised. I'll take care of all of them. The ship they gave him was called the Second Chance. It was beautiful, all smooth curves and silver metal, with engines that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of months. Maya came aboard with her bags and her smile, ready for whatever came next. Sol settled into the spot behind Daniel's chair, her eyes bright with excitement. On the day they left, crowds gathered to watch. Humans and aliens stood together on the observation decks of the station, waving and cheering as the Second Chance powered up its engines. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair and looked out at the stars. He thought about Captain Morgan and her cold gray eyes. He thought about the choice he made in that ruin, picking up a small creature because he could not walk away. He thought about 3,000 years of ice and darkness, and the dragon who kept him alive through all of it. Are you ready? Maya asked from the seat beside him. Daniel looked at her. He looked at Sol on his shoulder and Ember on his lap. He looked at the galaxy spread out before him, full of wonders he had never seen and stories he had never heard. I've been ready my whole life, he said. He pushed the throttle forward. The Second Chance leaped into the stars, carrying its crew toward whatever came next. Behind them, the council members watched the ship disappear into the darkness. The tree being turned to its companions and spoke words that would be remembered for generations. That is humanity. They find broken things and make them whole. They find lonely things and give them love. That is why they are special. That is why they matter. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a man who had lost everything smiled as he found something new. He had picked a little dragon over his mission, and he had woken to a future he never imagined. But the future was not over. It was just beginning. And Daniel Hayes was finally ready to see where it led.